Compared notes on their presentations. "My dad just closed a merger worth $50 million, bragged Tyler Whitman, a blonde boy whose father owned half the real estate in Northern Virginia. "Well, my mom met with 3 senators yesterday," countered Sophia Green, not to be outdone. Ms. Anderson swept into the room exactly as the bell rang. She was tall and elegant, with honey blonde hair swept into a perfect bun and clothes that screamed designer labels. At 45, she was considered one of Jefferson's most respected teachers, a 20-year veteran who had taught the children of 2 former presidents. "Good morning, class," she said, her voice carrying that particular tone teachers perfect, warm on the surface but with steel underneath. "I trust you're all prepared for today's presentations?" Her gaze swept the room, lingering a moment longer on Malik and Ethan than the others. Malik had noticed this before, how Ms. Anderson seemed to expect less from them. With other students, she pushed and challenged. With Malik, her voice often took on a patronizing tone, as if she were speaking to someone much younger. "We'll go in alphabetical order by last name," Ms. Anderson announced, consulting her tablet. "Carter, that means you're first." Malik's stomach dropped. He hadn't expected to go first. Taking a deep breath, he made his way to the front of the classroom, 24 pairs of eyes following his every move. "My name is Malik Carter," he began, his voice steadier than he felt. "My presentation is about my dad's job." "Speak up, Malik," Ms. Anderson instructed, her tone suggesting she'd already found his performance lacking. Malik cleared his throat and continued, louder this time. "My dad's name is Jonathan Carter, and he works at the Pentagon." The room fell silent for a split second before a snicker broke out from Tyler's corner. It spread like wildfire until half the class was giggling behind their hands. Ms. Anderson didn't silence them. Instead, a smug smile played at her lips. "The Pentagon, Malik?" "Really?" Malik nodded, confused by the response. "Yes, ma'am. He's worked there for 8 years. "Oh my," Ms. Anderson said with exaggerated interest. "And what does he do there? Is he the president too?" She turned toward the class with a theatrical wink that sent them into another fit of laughter. Malik felt heat rising in his cheeks. "No, ma'am. He works in security operations. I'm sure he does," Ms. Anderson interrupted, her voice dripping with condescension. "Perhaps next time we can stick to the truth rather than trying to impress everyone." Malik stood frozen at the front of the room. "But I am telling the truth," he insisted, his voice growing smaller. "You may sit down now, Malik," Ms. Anderson said firmly. "We have a lot of presentations to get through today." As Malik returned to his seat, his legs felt like lead. The sniggering continued around him, and he could hear Tyler whispering, "Pentagon. Yeah, right. Probably the janitor." From beside him, Ethan's hand shot up. "Ms. Anderson, Malik isn't lying. I've seen his dad's ID badge." Ms. Anderson's smile tightened. "That's enough, Ethan. Unless you'd like to join Malik in detention for disrupting class." Ethan's face reddened, but he fell silent, shooting Malik an apologetic look. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Malik moved through his classes mechanically, the humiliation of the morning weighing on him like a physical burden. By the time the final bell rang, all he wanted was to go home and forget this day had ever happened. Jonathan was waiting in the car when Malik emerged from school. One look at his son's face told him everything he needed to know. "Rough day?" he asked as Malik slid into the passenger seat. "Yeah," Malik mumbled, staring out the window. They drove in silence for a few minutes before Jonathan spoke again. "Want to talk about it?" Malik hesitated, then the words spilled out. "We had to talk about our parents' jobs today. I told them you work at the Pentagon, and everyone laughed at me. Even Ms. Anderson. She acted like I was making it up to sound important." Jonathan's hands tightened slightly on the steering wheel, but his voice remained calm. "I see. She made me look like a liar in front of everyone," Malik continued, his voice cracking. "Why didn't you ever come to career day? Then maybe they'd believe me." "You know why, Malik," Jonathan replied. "My schedule doesn't always allow for those things." "It's not fair," Malik said. "Everyone else's parents come to school stuff." Jonathan pulled the car into their driveway before turning to face his son. People doubt what they don't understand, Malik. Sometimes being underestimated can be an advantage. How is being called a liar an advantage? Malik asked bitterly. Before Jonathan could answer, his phone buzzed with an incoming call. He glanced at the screen, and Malik saw his father's expression change instantly, becoming harder, more focused. "I need to take this," Jonathan said, his tone shifting to something more businesslike. "Go inside and start your homework. We'll talk more later." Malik grabbed his backpack and trudged into the house while his father remained in the car. Through the living room window, he could see Jonathan speaking intently into his phone, his free hand making sharp, decisive gestures. Later that evening, as Malik finished his math homework at the kitchen table, he heard his father's voice from the study. The door was ajar, and Jonathan's words drifted out, tense and hushed. "I understand the implications. No, that's not acceptable. We need to address this immediately." Curious, Malik crept closer to the study door. His father rarely brought work home, and when he did, he usually kept his office door firmly closed. "I'll handle it personally," Jonathan was saying. "Yes, first thing tomorrow." Malik quickly retreated as he heard his father ending the call. A moment later, Jonathan emerged from the study, his face grave until he spotted Malik. Then, like flipping a switch, his expression softened. "Finished with your homework?" he asked. "Almost," Malik replied. "Is everything okay?" Jonathan nodded. "Just some work stuff. Nothing for you to worry about." Later that night, unable to sleep, Malik got up for a glass of water. As he passed by his bedroom window, a movement outside caught his eye. Looking down at the street, he saw a black SUV parked across from their house, its engine running. Malik watched as a man in a dark suit got out, spoke briefly into what looked like a radio on his wrist, then scanned the surrounding area before returning to the vehicle. Confused and a little frightened, Malik went to his father's room and knocked softly. "Dad, there's a car outside. I think someone's watching our house." Jonathan, who seemed to be still awake despite the late hour, came to the window and looked out. His face betrayed no surprise. "Don't worry about it," he said, placing a reassuring hand on Malik's shoulder. "Go back to bed. But who are they? Why are they outside our house?" "Malik," Jonathan said firmly, "some things are safer if you don't know. Trust me on this. Now go to sleep." Reluctantly, Malik returned to his room, but sleep didn't come easily. His mind kept replaying the day's humiliation, his father's mysterious phone call, and the black SUV keeping silent vigil outside their home. Morning arrived with the insistent beeping of Malik's alarm clock. For a moment, he hoped yesterday had been just a bad dream, but the memory of Ms. Anderson's mocking smile quickly crushed that hope. Downstairs, he found a note from his father on the kitchen counter. "Had to leave early. Mrs. Thompson will drive you to school. Have a good day, Dad." It wasn't unusual for his father to leave before dawn, but today it felt like one more disappointment. Malik had hoped to talk more about what had happened at school, maybe even convince his dad to speak with Ms. Anderson. Mrs. Thompson, their elderly neighbor who sometimes helped out when Jonathan had early meetings, arrived precisely at 7:30. She drove Malik to school in her ancient Volvo, chatting about her garden and her grandchildren, while Malik stared out the window, barely listening. "Your father works too hard," she commented as they pulled up to Jefferson Academy. "Important job, though. The country needs good men like him." Malik perked up at this. "You know what my dad does?" Mrs. Thompson smiled mysteriously. "I've lived next door to you for 6 years, child. I notice things." Before Malik could ask more questions, they had arrived at school, and the moment was lost. Miles away, Jonathan Carter sat in a classified meeting room deep within the Pentagon. Unlike the modest attire he wore at home, here he was dressed in a sharply tailored suit with his security badge prominently displayed. Around the table sat 6 other people, 3 military officers and 3 civilians in suits as expensive as his own. The cyber attack was sophisticated, a woman with short gray hair was saying. They targeted multiple systems simultaneously, but we believe their primary goal was access to the SCADA networks. Any idea who's behind it? Asked a Marine colonel. To Jonathan's right. Not definitively, the woman replied. But the code signatures match previous attacks attributed to. She was interrupted by an aide hurrying into the room. The young man leaned down to whisper something to Jonathan, whose expression immediately darkened. When did this happen? Jonathan asked sharply. Just now, sir. The system flagged it because of your personal security protocols. Jonathan stood, abruptly. I need to step out. There's been an unauthorized attempt to access Jefferson Academy's database. The others at the table exchanged confused glances. Jefferson Academy? The Marine colonel repeated. The private school? My son attends there, Jonathan said tersely. And someone just tried to breach their security system using the same methodology as the attacks we've been tracking. Back at Jefferson Academy, Malik was trying to make himself invisible in Ms. Anderson's class. After yesterday's humiliation, the last thing he wanted was to draw attention to himself. Ms. Anderson was reviewing their presentations, lavishing praise on certain students while offering only cursory acknowledgments to others. Tyler, your father's work in real estate development is truly shaping our city's future, she gushed. And Sophia, how fascinating that your mother is involved in crafting healthcare policy at such a high level. When she reached Malik's presentation, her lips curved into a patronizing smile. Malik, while imagination is certainly a valuable quality, remember that these presentations were meant to be factual. Several students snickered, and Malik sank lower in his seat. From across the room, Ethan shot him a sympathetic look. After class, as they headed to lunch, Ethan tried to cheer him up. Don't listen to her, Malik. She's always picking favorites. Easy for you to say, Malik muttered. She doesn't call you a liar in front of everyone. Ethan fell silent for a moment. My dad lost his job yesterday, he finally said, his voice small. The factory's closing down. Mom says we might have to move if he can't find something else. Soon. Malik immediately felt ashamed of his self-pity. I'm sorry, Ethan. That's terrible. Ethan shrugged, trying to look braver than he felt. It's fine. We'll figure it out. As they entered the cafeteria, Malik happened to glance out the window. A woman in a trench coat stood across the street, seemingly watching the school. There was something about her stance, alert, vigilant, that reminded him of his father. Who's that? He asked, pointing. Ethan squinted through the glass. Dunno. Probably just waiting for someone. But as Malik continued to watch, the woman raised what looked like a small camera and took several photos of the school building before walking away with purposeful strides. That afternoon, as Jonathan drove him home from school, Malik found himself studying his father with new curiosity. There were things about Jonathan that had always seemed ordinary. His modest clothes, his quiet demeanor, the way he never boasted about himself. But other things suddenly stood out as unusual. The late-night phone calls, the black SUVs, the way he carefully checked their surroundings when they were in public places. Dad? Malik ventured. What exactly do you do at the Pentagon? Jonathan's eyes remained fixed on the road. You know I work in security operations. But what does that mean? What do you actually do every day? A slight smile crossed Jonathan's face. Lots of meetings, lots of reports, not very exciting stuff. Then why are there people watching our house sometimes? Malik pressed. Jonathan's smile faded. What makes you think someone's watching our house? I saw them last night, and sometimes there are cars parked across the street with people just sitting in them. They never get out. After a long pause, Jonathan said, Some things are safer if you don't know too much about them, Malik. That's not just me trying to avoid your questions. It's the truth. But why would it be dangerous for me to know what you do? Malik persisted. I didn't say dangerous, Jonathan corrected gently. I said safer. There's a difference. Before Malik could ask another question, his school tablet sitting on his lap suddenly lit up with an alert. A string of random characters flashed across the screen, then disappeared as quickly as it had come. What was that? Jonathan asked sharply, having glimpsed the strange text. I don't know, Malik said, bewildered. Some weird message just popped up and then vanished. Jonathan's hand tightened on the steering wheel. "Let me see your tablet when we get home." Once they arrived, Jonathan spent nearly an hour examining Malik's tablet, running what looked like diagnostic programs from his own laptop. Finally, he handed the device back. "Everything seems normal now," he said, though the crease between his eyebrows suggested otherwise. "But Malik, listen to me carefully. If anything unusual happens at school, anything at all, I want you to call me immediately. Understand?" Malik nodded, increasingly confused by his father's intensity. "Is something wrong, Dad?" Jonathan rested, his hands on Malik's shoulders, looking him directly in the eyes. "Probably not. But I'd rather be overly cautious than not cautious enough." The next day at school, Miss Anderson seemed determined to continue Malik's humiliation. As they discussed famous government buildings in Washington, D.C., she pointedly called on him when they reached the Pentagon. "Malik, since your father supposedly works there," she said with a smirk, "perhaps you can tell us something about the Pentagon that isn't in our textbooks?" The class went quiet, most students grinning in anticipation of another embarrassing moment. But Malik had spent the evening reading everything he could find about the Pentagon, determined not to be caught off guard again. "The Pentagon has twice as many bathrooms as necessary," he said confidently. "It was built in the 1940s when Virginia was still segregated, so they had to have separate bathrooms for white and black employees. After segregation ended, they just kept all the bathrooms." Ms. Anderson's smirk faltered slightly. She clearly hadn't expected him to have an actual answer. "Well," she said after a moment, "that's correct, though hardly relevant to our discussion of architectural significance. And it has a hot dog stand in the central courtyard that Soviet missiles supposedly targeted during the Cold War," Malik continued, warming to his subject. "They thought it was the entrance to a secret bunker, because they saw high-ranking officials going there every day, but they were just getting lunch." A few students laughed, not mockingly this time, but genuinely amused by the anecdote. Miss Anderson's lips thinned. "That's enough, Malik. We need to move on." But the small victory gave Malik a boost of confidence that lasted throughout the day. As the final bell rang, Ms. Anderson called him back as the other students filed out. "Malik," she said, her voice honey-sweet but her eyes cold, "I understand you're going through a phase where you feel the need to embellish the truth. Many children do. But continuing to insist on these Pentagon stories is becoming disruptive on me." "Not making anything up," Malik said firmly. Ms. Anderson leaned forward, her smile never reaching her eyes. "If your father really works at the Pentagon, why not bring him in to prove it? Parents' Day is next week. That would settle everything, wouldn't it?" The challenge in her voice was unmistakable. She was certain he would back down, admit to lying, or make excuses why his father couldn't attend. Instead, Malik met her gaze steadily. "Fine, he will." For a split second, uncertainty flickered across Ms. Anderson's face, but she quickly masked it with a patronizing smile. "Wonderful. I look forward to meeting him." That evening, Malik approached his father with nervous determination. Jonathan was at the kitchen table, laptop open, frowning at something on the screen. "Dad?" Malik began hesitantly. "There's Parents' Day at school next week. I really need you to come." Jonathan looked up, his expression distracted. "Parents' Day? You know how difficult it is for me to commit to school events, Malik." "I know, but..." Malik took a deep breath and explained the situation. Ms. Anderson's continued mockery, her challenge, the way she'd made him a laughingstock among his classmates. As Malik spoke, Jonathan's expression gradually shifted from distracted to focused, then to something harder to read. By the time Malik finished, his father's face had settled into a calm determination that Malik recognized from rare occasions, when Jonathan was truly angry but controlling it. "I see," Jonathan said simply. He closed his laptop. "What day is this Parents' Day?" "Next Friday," Malik said hopefully. "Will you come?" Jonathan nodded once, decisively. "Yes, I'll be there." "Really?" Malik couldn't hide his surprise. His father had never agreed so quickly to a school event before. "Really," Jonathan confirmed. I think it's time I met your teacher. Malik felt a weight lift from his shoulders. Finally, Ms. Anderson would see the truth. Later that night, Jonathan made another of his mysterious phone calls from his study. This time, Malik was certain he heard his father mention Jefferson Academy and security protocols before the study door closed completely. Outside, the black SUV was back, parked in the same spot as before. But now, instead of feeling frightened by its presence, Malik found it oddly reassuring. Something was happening. Something his father wasn't telling him about. But whatever it was, he was beginning to believe it might work in his favor. As he drifted off to sleep, Malik thought about the look on Ms. Anderson's face when his father walked into that classroom. For the first time since the humiliating presentation, he found himself looking forward to going to school. The days leading up to Parents' Day crawled by with agonizing slowness. In class, Ms. Anderson had been wearing a particularly smug smile whenever she glanced at Malik. Twice she had made offhand comments about tall tales and vivid imaginations while looking directly at him. "She thinks your dad isn't coming," Ethan whispered during their Thursday math lesson. "He'll be there," Malik replied with more confidence than he felt. Though his father had promised to attend, Malik knew how unpredictable Jonathan's schedule could be. Just last month, he had missed Malik's science fair because of some emergency at work. That evening at dinner, Malik picked at his food nervously. "You're still coming tomorrow, right?" Jonathan looked up from his plate. "I said I would be there, didn't I?" "Yeah, but sometimes things come up at work." "Not tomorrow," Jonathan said firmly. "I've already cleared my schedule." Malik nodded, relieved. "Ms. Anderson doesn't believe you work at the Pentagon. She thinks I made it all up." Something flashed in Jonathan's eyes, a hardness Malik rarely saw at home. "Does she now?" "She's been making fun of me for it," Malik continued. "In front of everyone." Jonathan set down his fork with deliberate calm. "Tell me more about Ms. Anderson." Malik described his teacher, her favoritism toward the wealthy students, her subtle put-downs, the way she seemed to enjoy humiliating him. Jonathan listened without interruption, his expression growing more thoughtful with each detail. When Malik finished, he simply said, "I see." Later that night, Malik noticed his father in his home office, the door partially open. Jonathan was on his laptop, but instead of financial spreadsheets or news sites, Malik glimpsed what looked like personnel files on the screen. He caught a brief look at Ms. Anderson's photograph before Jonathan noticed him and closed the laptop. "Shouldn't you be in bed?" his father asked, not unkindly. "Just getting some water," Malik replied, wondering what his father had been looking at and why. The next morning, Malik woke to find his father already dressed. Not in his usual work attire, but in a crisply pressed dark suit with a blue tie. That seemed more formal than his everyday clothes. On the kitchen counter lay a leather portfolio and an ID badge Malik had never seen before. "Is that your Pentagon ID?" Malik asked, reaching for it. Jonathan gently moved it out of reach. "Yes, and it stays with me." Malik noticed his father checking his watch repeatedly during breakfast, as if coordinating the timing of their departure, with precision. When they finally got into the car, Jonathan's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then made a brief call. "We're leaving now. ETA 20 minutes. They rode in silence for several blocks before Malik gathered the courage to ask, "Dad, are you okay? You seem different today." Jonathan's expression softened. "I'm fine, Malik. Just focused." "Are you mad about Ms. Anderson?" "Not mad," Jonathan replied after a moment's consideration. "But I don't appreciate anyone calling my son a liar." As they approached Jefferson Academy, Malik noticed something unusual. 3 black SUVs, identical to the one he'd seen outside their house, were parked across the street from the school. Men in dark suits stood beside them wearing sunglasses despite the cloudy morning. "Dad, who are those men?" Jonathan glanced at them briefly. "Colleagues." "Why are they here?" "Support," Jonathan said simply, pulling into the school's visitor parking lot. As they walked toward the entrance, Malik felt a strange mixture of anxiety and anticipation. Part of him couldn't wait to see Ms. Anderson's face when his father walked in. another part worried that somehow, something would go wrong. "Don't worry," Jonathan said as if reading his thoughts. "Everything will be fine." Inside, the school hallways were bustling with parents and students. Parents' Day at Jefferson Academy was always a major event, with many families using it as an opportunity to network and forge connections. Malik spotted Tyler's father, in an expensive Italian suit, already deep in conversation with the father of another student. They checked in at the front desk, where the secretary did a double-take. When she saw Jonathan's ID badge, "Mr. Carter," she said, her professional smile faltering slightly. "We weren't expecting. I mean, it's lovely to have you join us today." "Thank you," Jonathan replied politely. "Could you direct us to Ms. Anderson's classroom?" "Of course. Room 112, just down that hallway on the right." As they walked, Malik noticed other parents and staff giving them curious glances. Jonathan's badge, prominently displayed on his suit jacket, seemed to be attracting attention. "Why is everyone staring?" Malik whispered. "People are curious about things they don't see every day," Jonathan answered. They reached room 112, where a small crowd of parents and students had already gathered. Ms. Anderson stood at the front, perfectly poised in a cream-colored blouse and navy skirt, greeting each family with practiced charm. When she spotted Malik, a satisfied smirk crossed her face, clearly assuming he had come alone. Then her eyes shifted to Jonathan, took in his immaculate suit, his commanding presence, and finally settled on the Pentagon badge displayed on his lapel. The smirk vanished, replaced by an expression of disbelief. "Ms. Anderson," Malik said, unable to keep a note of triumph from his voice. "This is my dad, Jonathan Carter. He works at the Pentagon." Jonathan extended his hand. "Ms. Anderson, I've heard so much about you." She took his hand automatically, her face pale. "Mr. Carter, welcome to Jefferson Academy." "Thank you," Jonathan replied smoothly. "Malik has told me about your interest in his presentations about my work." Ms. Anderson's composure, usually unshakable, visibly crumbled. "Yes, well, the children sometimes have such creative interpretations of their parents' careers." "Indeed," Jonathan agreed, though in this case I can assure you Malik was quite accurate. Before Ms. Anderson could respond, the classroom door opened again, and a man in a dark suit stepped in. He scanned the room, spotted Jonathan, and approached with urgent purpose. "Sir," he said quietly, "there's something that requires your attention." Jonathan nodded, then turned back to Ms. Anderson. "You'll have to excuse me for a moment. Government, business." He stepped outside with the man, leaving Malik standing proudly beside a thoroughly discomfited Ms. Anderson. "Well," she said, attempting to regain control of the situation, "shall we begin our Parents' Day activities?" For the next half hour, Ms. Anderson led the class through presentations and discussions, though her usual confidence was noticeably diminished. She kept glancing nervously at the door, where Jonathan stood in deep conversation with not one, but now 3 men in suits. Throughout the classroom, parents and students whispered among themselves, occasional glances thrown Malik's way. For once, he wasn't being ignored or mocked. He was the center of fascinated attention. "Dude," Ethan whispered, leaning over from his desk, "your dad really does work at the Pentagon." "I told you," Malik replied, unable to suppress a grin. Their conversation was interrupted by the classroom door opening once more. This time, it was Principal Hayes who entered, looking flustered. He scanned the room, his eyes settling on Ms. Anderson. "Ah, Ms. Anderson," he said with forced cheerfulness. "I see you've met Mr. Carter." "Yes," she replied stiffly. "We were just discussing—" "Excellent. Excellent," the principal interrupted, clearly agitated. He turned to address the class. "Students, we're going to have a special presentation today. Mr. Carter has graciously agreed to speak to us about his work with the government." Ms. Anderson's face registered shock. Clearly, this deviation from her carefully planned Parents' Day schedule had not been discussed with her. Principal Hayes ushered Jonathan to the front of the classroom. "Mr. Carter is a senior security strategist at the Pentagon," he announced, emphasizing each word as if to drive home the point to Ms. Anderson. "We're very honored to have him visit Jefferson Academy today." Jonathan took his place at the front of the room with the easy confidence of someone accustomed to speaking before much more intimidating audiences. The classroom fell silent, every eye fixed on him. "Thank you, Principal Hayes," Jonathan began. "Before I start, I want to say how proud I am of my son, Malik. He's shown remarkable resilience and character in situations that would challenge most adults." Malik felt his chest swell with pride as his father's gaze briefly met his. "Now, I can't discuss the specifics of my work for obvious reasons," Jonathan continued. "But I can tell you a bit about what we do at the Pentagon. Contrary to what you might have seen in movies, most of our work involves planning, analysis, and prevention. Every day, dedicated professionals work to identify and neutralize threats before they become dangers." As Jonathan spoke, Malik noticed Ms. Anderson inching toward the back of the classroom, clearly trying to make herself less conspicuous. "One thing I've learned in my career," Jonathan said, his voice carrying effortlessly across the room, "is that prejudice, prejudging situations or people based on assumptions rather than facts, is one of the greatest barriers to effective security. When we dismiss information because it doesn't fit our preconceptions, we create blind spots, and blind spots are dangerous." Several parents shifted uncomfortably, and Ms. Anderson's face flushed red. It was clear to everyone that Jonathan's words carried a message beyond national security. "You don't always see the people protecting you," Jonathan continued. "But that doesn't mean they're not there. The most effective protection often happens without anyone realizing it was needed in the first place." A student raised his hand. Tyler, the boy who had laughed loudest at Malik's presentation. "Yes?" Jonathan acknowledged him. "Sir, have you ever been in a gunfight?" Tyler asked, his tone caught between awe and skepticism. A slight smile crossed Jonathan's face. "As I said, our goal is to resolve situations before they reach that point. But yes, I've had to face dangerous situations. The key is preparation, teamwork, and—" Jonathan stopped mid-sentence as his phone vibrated in his pocket. He checked it discreetly, his expression instantly shifting from relaxed to alert. To most in the room, the change might have been imperceptible, but Malik recognized it immediately. It was the same look his father got when those late-night emergency calls came in. Jonathan smoothly redirected, "The key is preparation, teamwork, and constant vigilance. Speaking of which, I should check in with my team. Principal Hayes, could I have a word outside?" The principal nodded, clearly surprised by the sudden interruption, but unwilling to question someone of Jonathan's authority. As Jonathan stepped outside with Principal Hayes, the classroom erupted in excited chatter. "Your dad is so cool," Ethan whispered to Malik. "Did you see Ms. Anderson's face when he started talking about prejudice?" Malik nodded, though his attention was focused on his father through the classroom window. Jonathan was showing something on his phone to Principal Hayes, whose expression had grown increasingly grave. Ms. Anderson, attempting to regain control of her classroom, clapped her hands. "All right, everyone, let's continue with our scheduled activities. Parents, if you could join your children at their desks for our next project." But her authority had been severely undermined. Parents and students alike kept glancing toward the door, waiting for Jonathan's return. After several minutes, Principal Hayes re-entered alone, his face tense. He whispered something to Ms. Anderson, whose eyes widened in alarm. "Class," she said, her voice slightly higher than normal. "We're going to take a short break. Please remain in the classroom until further notice." "What's happening?" Malik asked Ethan, a sense of unease growing in his stomach. "No idea," Ethan replied. "But your dad looked pretty serious." Jonathan Carter stood in the hallway outside the classroom, his government-issued phone displaying an alert that made his blood run cold. "Breach detected. Jefferson Academy." "How long ago?" he asked the agent who had delivered the initial warning. "Minutes, sir. The cyber team detected it during routine monitoring. They flagged it immediately because of your security protocols regarding this location." Jonathan nodded grimly. He had indeed placed special monitoring on the school's systems, after the previous attempts to breach them, a precaution that now seemed prescient. "What's the nature of the breach?" Multiple entry points, sir. They hit the security cameras first, then the door locking mechanisms. It has all the hallmarks of the group we've been tracking. Jonathan's jaw tightened. For months, his team had, been monitoring a sophisticated foreign intelligence cell operating on American soil. Their usual targets were defense contractors and government facilities, not private schools. The fact that they had suddenly shifted focus to Jefferson Academy couldn't be coincidence. "Get me Agent Ramirez," he ordered, "and implement Security Protocol Omega for this building." As the agent hurried to comply, Principal Hayes approached, his face a mask of poorly concealed panic. "Mr. Carter, what exactly is happening? Should we evacuate the building?" "No," Jonathan replied firmly. "For now, everyone stays put. I need you to initiate a soft lockdown. Keep all students and staff in their current locations, doors closed but not barricaded. Make it sound routine, like a drill. Can you do that?" The principal nodded uncertainly. "Yes, but..." "Good. Do it now, please." As Hayes hurried toward the main office, Jonathan saw a familiar figure entering the school's main doors. FBI agent Maria Ramirez, the mysterious woman in the trench coat Malik had spotted watching the school days earlier. "Carter," she greeted, him with a curt nod. "Quite a coincidence you being here today." "I don't believe in coincidences," Jonathan replied, "especially not when my son's school is targeted by the same group we've been tracking for months." Ramirez's expression hardened. "We have reason to believe there's a threat inside this building. The cyber intrusion is likely just the first step. Your people in position?" She nodded. "Perimeter is secure. We've got teams covering all exits." "Good. Let's..." Jonathan's response was cut short by the school's PA system crackling to life. "Attention all students and staff," Principal Hayes' voice announced, remarkably steady considering the circumstances. "We are initiating a precautionary lockdown procedure. Please remain in your current locations with doors closed until further notice. This is not a drill, but there is no cause for alarm." "No cause for alarm," Ramirez muttered. "That always works." Jonathan was already moving back toward Ms. Anderson's classroom. "I need to get back to my son." Inside the classroom, the announcement had generated precisely the kind of nervous tension Hayes had hoped to avoid. Parents were checking their phones, students were whispering among themselves, and Ms. Anderson stood frozen at the front of the room, clearly unsure how to proceed. Jonathan entered and immediately took control of the situation. "Everyone, please, remain calm. This is a standard security precaution." "What's happening, Mr. Carter?" one of the parents demanded. "Are our children in danger?" "Right now, the best thing everyone can do is stay calm and follow instructions," Jonathan replied, evenly. "Ms. Anderson, please make sure all blinds are closed and the door is locked." The teacher moved to comply, though her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted the blinds. Jonathan noticed Tyler's father, Mr. Whitman, watching him suspiciously. "Is this related to your presence here today?" Whitman asked accusingly. "Have you brought some sort of threat to our children?" Before Jonathan could respond, Ms. Anderson surprisingly came to his defense. "Mr. Whitman, please. Mr. Carter is clearly helping to ensure our safety." Jonathan gave her a brief nod of thanks before addressing the room. "I understand everyone's concern. Please trust that we have security personnel throughout the building. The lockdown is precautionary." He moved to where Malik and Ethan sat, their faces showing a mixture of fear and excitement. "Dad, what's really happening?" Malik whispered. "Just a security concern we're addressing," Jonathan replied quietly. "I need you to help keep everyone calm, okay?" Malik nodded, recognizing the seriousness in his father's tone. "Is it because of your work?" Before Jonathan could answer, his phone vibrated again. The message was brief but alarming. "Suspicious package found in basement. EOD team en route." "I need to step out again," Jonathan told Malik. "Stay here. Don't leave this room for any reason." As Jonathan moved toward the door, Ms. Anderson approached him. "Mr. Carter," she said softly, her earlier smugness entirely gone. "Should I be worried?" "Just keep everyone in this room," he replied. "I'll be back as soon as I can." Outside in the hallway, Jonathan found Agent Ramirez waiting for him, accompanied by 2 FBI agents in tactical gear. EOD team is 10 minutes out, she reported. Building services found a package near the main electrical controls. They say it has wires visible. Show me, Jonathan said. They moved swiftly through the eerily quiet hallways, descending a service stairwell to the school's basement. 2 more agents were already there, keeping a safe distance from a backpack propped against the wall near the electrical panel. No one's touched it? Jonathan asked. Negative. Building services supervisor spotted it during his security sweep, called it in immediately. Jonathan approached cautiously, studying the backpack without touching it. The partially unzipped top revealed what looked like circuit boards and wiring. This isn't a bomb, he said after a moment. It's a surveillance package. High-end military grade. Someone's been monitoring this building's systems from the inside. Ramirez frowned. Why would foreign operatives be interested in a private school? That's what we need to find out, Jonathan replied. He turned to one of the agents. Get me the school's personnel files, everyone who has access to this area, and I want security footage from the past week. Sir, the agent replied. The school's security system has been compromised. We don't know if the footage is intact. Then get me the backup tapes. A place like this will have physical backups. As the agents hurried to comply, Jonathan's phone buzzed with another message. This one sent a chill down his spine. Facial recognition match on school maintenance staff. Known foreign operative. Last seen near East Wing 5 minutes ago. Jonathan showed the message to Ramirez, whose expression darkened. The East Wing, that's where the server room is located. And where they keep student and family information, Jonathan added grimly. This isn't random. They're after something specific. Or someone, Ramirez suggested. The implication hung in the air between them. Jonathan's position at the Pentagon gave him access to some of the nation's most sensitive security information. A foreign intelligence operation targeting his son's school on the very day of his visit couldn't be coincidence. We need to lock down the server room, Jonathan decided, and I want all maintenance staff accounted for immediately. As they headed toward the East Wing, Principal Hayes intercepted them, his earlier composure now completely gone. Mr. Carter, parents are getting agitated. They're demanding answers. Some are threatening to leave with their children despite the lockdown. Tell them that doing so could put everyone at risk, Jonathan replied firmly. This is a matter of national security. Now, Mr. Hayes, the principal's eyes widened. National security? At a school? I need your cooperation, not your questions, Jonathan said. Keep everyone where they are. We'll handle this. As Hayes reluctantly departed, Agent Ramirez received an update through her earpiece. We've got a problem, she reported. The maintenance worker identified as a foreign operative. He's not in the East Wing. According to building services, he should be doing rounds in the West Wing right now. Jonathan felt his blood run cold. The classrooms are in the West Wing, including your son's, Ramirez confirmed. Without another word, they both began running toward Ms. Anderson's classroom. As they rounded the corner, Jonathan saw a man in a gray maintenance uniform outside room 112, fiddling with what appeared to be a key card reader next to the door. FBI, don't move, Ramirez shouted, drawing her. Weapon, the man's head snapped up. For a split second, his eyes met Jonathan's, cold, calculating eyes that Jonathan instantly recognized as those of a trained operative. Then he bolted, running down the hallway away from them. Stay with the classroom, Jonathan called to Ramirez, as he took off after the man. The chase led through the winding hallways of Jefferson Academy, past startled teachers who had peeked out of their rooms despite the lockdown orders. The operative was fast and clearly knew the building's layout, taking turns and shortcuts that suggested detailed planning. Jonathan followed him down another stairwell, into a service corridor that led toward the cafeteria. As they burst into the large empty dining area, the man suddenly whirled around, a knife appearing in his hand. You should have stayed out of this, Carter, he said in heavily accented English. Who sent you? Jonathan demanded, keeping a safe distance, his body automatically shifting into a defensive stance. The man smirked. You know who, the same people who've been watching your every move for months. Did you really think your son would be safe here? A cold fury rose in Jonathan's chest. If anything happens to my son, then you should have been more careful about where you sent him to school, the man interrupted. So many important families, so much valuable data. This place is a goldmine of intelligence. Before Jonathan could respond, the gymnasium doors behind the operative burst open. 2 FBI agents rushed in, weapons drawn. The operative, seeing he was cornered, made a desperate lunge toward Jonathan with his knife. Jonathan sidestepped the attack with the practiced ease of someone with extensive combat training. In one fluid motion, he caught the man's arm, twisted it behind his back and forced him to the ground. "It's over," he said as the agents moved in to secure the operative. "Tell your handlers they picked the wrong school to target." With the immediate threat neutralized, Jonathan hurried back toward Ms. Anderson's classroom, his mind racing. If this operative had been watching the school, what was his ultimate goal? And more importantly, was he working alone? As he approached room 112, he saw Agent Ramirez outside the door, speaking urgently into her radio. "We've got another problem," she said as Jonathan reached her. "Building security just reported movement in the air ducts near the main office, and there's an unauthorized voice on the school's radio frequency." Jonathan's expression hardened. This was never about data or surveillance. It's a coordinated extraction operation. They're after one of the students. Or multiple students. Ramirez suggested. "Think about it. This school has children of diplomats, government officials, defense contractors, including my son," Jonathan finished grimly. "We need to get everyone out of here. Now." Just as he reached for the classroom door, a muffled bang echoed through the building, followed by the immediate wail of fire alarms. Inside the classroom, panic erupted. Parents clutched their children, students cried out in fear, and Ms. Anderson stood helplessly at the front, trying in vain to maintain order. "Everyone stay calm," Jonathan called as he entered. His authoritative voice cut through the chaos, bringing a momentary hush to the room. "We need to evacuate in an orderly fashion. Follow the FBI agents outside to the designated safe area." "What? Was that explosion?" someone demanded. "Likely a diversionary tactic," Jonathan replied honestly. "Which is why we need to move quickly but calmly." As Agent Ramirez began organizing the evacuation, Jonathan moved to Malik's side. "Stay right beside me," he instructed his son. "No matter what happens, don't get separated." Malik nodded, his eyes wide but remarkably steady. "What about Ethan?" Jonathan glanced at Malik's friend, who looked terrified. "He comes with us. Both of you, hold on to my jacket and don't let go." As they joined the line of students and parents being escorted from the classroom, Jonathan noticed Ms. Anderson hanging back, seemingly frozen with indecision. "Ms. Anderson," he called, "come with us. Now." The teacher startled at his voice, then hurried to join them. "I'm sorry," she whispered as they moved into the hallway. "I didn't believe him. I didn't believe Malik about you." "We'll discuss that later," Jonathan replied curtly. "Right now, focus on getting safely out of this building." The hallway was filling with students and staff from other classrooms, all being directed toward the nearest exits by FBI agents and local police who had responded to the alarm. Through the growing crowd, Jonathan spotted something that made his blood run cold. Another maintenance worker, moving against the flow of evacuees, his hand reaching suspiciously inside his jacket. "Ramirez!" Jonathan called out, pointing toward the suspicious figure. 3 o'clock. The FBI agent reacted instantly, signaling to her team. 2 agents broke off from the evacuation line and moved to intercept the man, who, seeing he'd been spotted, suddenly pulled out what looked like a small remote device. "Everybody down!" Jonathan shouted, pulling Malik and Ethan to the floor and shielding them with his body. Ms. Anderson dropped beside them, covering her head. Instead of an explosion, however, the school's lights suddenly went dark. Emergency yaw. Lighting kicked in seconds later, casting the hallway in an eerie red glow. "Power cut," Jonathan muttered, helping the boys back to their feet. "They're trying to disable the security systems completely." The evacuation continued, more urgent. Now in the dimmed lighting, Jonathan kept a firm grip on Malik and Ethan as they neared the exit, his eyes constantly scanning for threats. They had almost reached the doors when a loud crash came from behind them. Jonathan turned to see the second operative engaged in a struggle with the FBI agents, knocking over a display case in the process. Glass shattered across the floor as students screamed and parents pushed toward the exits in panic. "Keep moving," Jonathan urged, guiding the boys and Ms. Anderson forward. Outside, the school grounds had been transformed into a tactical operations center. Police cars, FBI vehicles, and even military personnel created a secure perimeter around the building. Students and staff were being directed to gathering points where they were checked off against attendance records. Jonathan guided Malik and Ethan to the nearest FBI checkpoint, where Agent Ramirez was coordinating the response. "Status?" Jonathan asked her. "Two operatives in custody, one still unaccounted for," she reported tersely. "We found surveillance equipment in the server room, the principal's office, and 3 classrooms." "Including Ms. Anderson's?" Jonathan asked. Ramirez nodded. "Primary target. They've been monitoring it for at least a week, according to the equipment." Timestamps. Ms. Anderson, who had been standing nearby, gasped audibly. "Monitoring my classroom? Why?" "That's what we intend to find out," Jonathan replied, looking back at the school building where FBI agents were still conducting a thorough sweep. As they stood in the relative safety of the perimeter, Jonathan noticed Malik looking up at him with a mixture of fear, confusion, and a dawning understanding. "This is why you couldn't come to school events before, isn't it?" Malik asked quietly. "This is what you really do." Jonathan placed a hand on his son's shoulder. "Part of it, yes. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you more." "Is this because of your work? Is that why they came here?" Before Jonathan could answer, a suspicious bag was carried out of the building by an FBI evidence team. As they set it down at a safe distance, Jonathan's face darkened with recognition. "That's not just surveillance equipment," he said to Ramirez. "That's a data mining package designed to extract information from secure networks. Military grade." "What would they want from a school network?" Ramirez wondered. Jonathan's expression was grim as the pieces finally came together. They weren't after the school's data. They were using the school's connection to access the home networks of government officials and defense contractors through their children's devices. Tablets, laptops, phones, all connecting to both school and home networks. Creating a backdoor into otherwise secure systems, Ramirez concluded. Clever. Ms. Anderson, who had been listening to this exchange with growing horror, suddenly turned to Malik. "I owe you an apology," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I should have believed you about your father." Malik, still processing the day's events, simply nodded. Jonathan checked his phone as another update came in. "They've apprehended the third operative trying to escape through the service entrance. The building is secure." A collective sigh of relief passed through the gathered parents and staff. As the immediate danger receded, Jonathan found himself the center of attention, with parents approaching to thank him and ask questions. Through it all, he kept Malik close by his side, his hand resting protectively on his son's shoulder. The look they exchanged spoke volumes, a new understanding between father and son, forged in the crucible of this extraordinary day. Principal Hayes, looking considerably more disheveled than he had that morning, approached them. "Mr. Carter, I don't know how to thank you. Your quick action may have saved lives today." "I was just doing my job," Jonathan replied. "But if you want to thank me, you might start by ensuring all students at Jefferson Academy are treated with equal respect."